My dear friend, imagine this. You're sitting in a conversation and suddenly someone tries to put you down. Their voice is filled with arrogance, their eyes trying to prove they're above you. In that moment, the whole room feels heavy. Maybe normally you would choose silence. You swallow your response trying to keep the peace, but inside you feel hurt. Let me ask you, have you ever felt that way? A single arrogant word, a small gesture, cutting like an invisible blade. When I was younger, I often reacted immediately. I wanted to protect myself to prove that my voice mattered. But as I grew older, I discovered a truth: anger never brings victory. It only leaves exhaustion in the heart. And this is where ancient Stoic philosophy steps in teaching us that true strength does not lie in winning arguments, but in keeping the mind at peace. One of my patients, now over 60, once told me, "Doctor, all my life I argued with coworkers, with friends, even with my wife and children. I always wanted to prove I was right. But now, looking back, all I see are wounds and distance I created." I looked at him and shared something simple. You don't need to win every conversation. You only need to win yourself. The Stoics understood this over 2,000 years ago. They saw arrogance as a fragile mask. The more someone tries to prove their superiority, the more they reveal their inner insecurity. Seneca once wrote, "Arrogance is the desire to seem bigger, when in fact you're smaller." Stop and think, aren't those who brag and put others down often the weakest inside? Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you cannot control the tongues of others, but you can always control your own response. And when you control your response, you take charge of your life. Now imagine this. You're in a meeting and someone dismisses your idea with contempt. Everyone expects you to fire back. Instead, you smile and calmly say, "You have a right to think that way." The whole room falls silent. The arrogant person loses their stage because you refuse to play their game. And you remain steady and at peace. That is Stoic power. Not shouting louder, but not needing to shout at all and still earning respect. I often tell people over 50 life is like a house. If you let anyone storm in, yell, and make a mess, you'll never have a place to rest. But if you learn to close the door, to choose who comes in and keep the inside clean, you will always have peace to return to. That's why strategic silence is so important. Sometimes you don't need to say a word. Your calm silence confuses the arrogant as if they were speaking to a wall that doesn't move. Have you ever felt that moment when someone wants to argue, but you just smile and stay silent? And in that silence, they feel lost while you feel lighter. Modern science confirms this too. People who can regulate their responses, who don't let emotions rule them, often have a steadier blood pressure, healthier hearts, and longer lives. Calmness is not just philosophy, it is medicine. I remember another patient, a woman in her 70s. She told me that family gatherings often turned into heated arguments among her children. In the past, she always stepped in to settle things, trying to be the winner. But after practicing Stoicism, she said, "Now I just listen, then say, it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently." And strangely, the tension disappears. She smiled and said, "I realized I don't need to raise my voice to earn respect." You see, as we grow older into our 50s and 60s, we begin to understand real strength is not about winning debates, but keeping the heart at peace. And in doing so, helping others find peace too. And finally, there is one phrase I often use to end any argument. If that makes you happy, then that's fine. At first it seems simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It pulls back the curtain, revealing that arrogance is just a desperate attempt to seek happiness from the outside. And when you refuse to play that game, you've already won. My dear friend, let me leave you with a question in those moments when you feel put down. How will you choose to respond? Will you step into the noisy fight, or will you choose to hold on to your inner peace? Stoic phrases are not just words, they are a way of living. And when you practice them, you receive 3 gifts: respect, serenity, and freedom of the soul. And if you wish to continue this journey with me, subscribe to the channel. Each day, we'll learn together how to live slower, deeper, and stronger from within. Remember, whoever controls themselves has already won long before the argument begins. My dear friend, think back to a time in your life when someone tried to prove they were smarter than you. Maybe it was a coworker in a meeting, a relative at a family gathering, or even a longtime friend. They spoke with such confidence as if their opinion was the only truth, and all eyes turned to you, waiting to see how you would respond. In moments like this, most people do one of 2 things. Either they argue back harshly to defend themselves, or they stay silent and swallow the feeling of being belittled. But there is a third way, a Stoic path, and it is far more powerful than the other 2. It begins with a phrase that seems harmless. That's an interesting point. You've given me something to think about. At first, it may sound like a concession, but in truth, it is a subtle strategy. The arrogant expect resistance. They want you to get angry to argue so they can prove themselves superior. When you don't give them what they expect, you break the play they're trying to perform. I once had a patient, a retired teacher at 65. He told me that in neighborhood meetings, there was always one man who loved to lecture others, speaking loudly at length and usually ending by putting down everyone else's ideas. In the past, this teacher would argue back and the meeting would spiral into conflict. But one day he tried something different. He simply said, "That's an interesting point. You've given me something to think about." The result was surprising. The man fell silent because he no longer had fuel for his argument. The meeting went on peacefully, and people began looking at the retired teacher with more respect. You see, sometimes we don't need to defeat others with logic. We only need to remain calm and let them lose their own armor. Imagine another situation. You're at a family dinner. A relative begins bragging about their financial knowledge, then turns to you with a mocking tone. You don't understand anything about this. Everyone at the table waits for your reaction. You could argue back, or you could stay silent and feel small. But if you smile and say, "That's an interesting point, you've given me something to think about," what happens then? The atmosphere changes instantly. The other person can't keep attacking because you didn't resist and you didn't submit either. You turn their attack into a moment of reflection. And that calmness makes others see you not as a loser, but as the one in control. Seneca once said, "Nothing is so arrogant that it cannot be softened by reason." This phrase is living proof of that wisdom. At 60, I've worked with hundreds of patients over 50. I've seen that those who react quickly, who get angry easily, often live under constant stress. High blood pressure, rapid heartbeat, restless sleep. On the other hand, those who pause, listen, and turn conflict into reflection have far more stable mental health. Modern science agrees when you choose a calm response instead of anger, your brain releases less cortisol, the stress hormone. That means with just one simple phrase, "That's an interesting point," you are not only mastering the conversation, you're protecting your heart and your mind. This is a benefit the young rarely understand fully, but once you reach your 50s and 60s, it becomes clear keeping peace in your heart is also keeping health in your body. My dear friend, pause and think. When was the last time someone belittled you? How did you react? Did you feel tired afterward? I want you to try this Stoic phrase just once. No debate, no need to prove victory or defeat. Just say, "That's an interesting point. You've given me something to think about." Then watch the miracle happen. You'll see the arrogant person stop confused. You'll see others look at you with respect. And most importantly, you'll feel a quiet peace inside, no longer dragged into a meaningless power game. When you learn to turn provocation into reflection, you take a long step forward on the Stoic path, the path of wisdom, peace, and dignity. In life, we cannot avoid arrogant people, but we can always choose how to face them. And each time you choose calmness, you plant a seed of respect. But remember, you don't need to win every argument. You only need to win yourself. And if you found value in today's lesson, don't forget to subscribe. In the next part, I'll share another phrase, one that sounds gentle, but is in fact an invisible shield that helps you rise above arrogance without losing your calm. Which situation will you try this phrase in? First, share it in the comments. I believe your story will inspire many others on this same journey. My dear friend, I want you to imagine a familiar situation. You're in a debate, maybe at work, in a council meeting, or even at a family dinner. Someone is speaking loudly, insisting their view is the only truth. They want you to respond immediately. They want a direct confrontation. Usually we feel pressured to answer right away. We react in haste and sometimes say things we later regret. But there is another way, a way of mastering the moment that the ancient Stoics deeply value. It's when you smile, look them in the eye, and say, I'd prefer to hear more before I respond. It sounds simple, but do you see its power? The arrogant expect instant pushback. They feed on conflict like a fire that needs more fuel. When you delay your response, you don't just put out the flames, you show that you are the one in control. Marcus Aurelius said our power lies in how we choose to respond. With this phrase, you make that choice clear. You choose to slow down. You choose to listen. You choose not to be led by urgency. One of my patients, James, is 72 and used to manage a large company. He told me that in meetings, younger employees would push hard, trying to own the room by forcing him to answer immediately. He used to snap back, but after practicing Stoicism, he changed. He said, now I just look at them and say, I'd prefer to hear more before I respond. Strangely, the whole room goes quiet. They pause and I'm at peace. He laughed and added, I realized a strategic silence is stronger than 1,000 arguments. Now try another scenario. You're at a family meeting. Your children are arguing heatedly about how to care for aging parents. One raises their voice trying to impose a view. Others are frustrated. All eyes turn to you. Whose side are you on? Instead of taking sides or speaking too soon, you smile and gently say, I'd prefer to hear more before I respond. Instantly, the energy shifts. The argument pauses. Everyone realizes you're not rushing you, respect everyone, and want to hear fully before deciding. That's not just wisdom, it's a lesson for the whole family. Slowness often brings peace. The Stoics called this the power pause. In that pause, you take a breath, steady your heartbeat, and let clear thinking, not impulsive emotion, speak for you. In medicine, especially with older patients, I often advise practicing one beat of rest before you react. It avoids conflict and is remarkably good for your health. When you get angry and react instantly, your body releases cortisol, the stress hormone. Your heart rate spikes, blood pressure rises. For those over 50, this can increase the risk of heart attack or a stroke. But when you say, I'd prefer to hear more before I respond, you give yourself precious seconds to reduce that physiological surge. Research shows that delaying your response just 10-15 seconds in a tense moment helps stabilize your heart rate and improves the decision making. So this Stoic phrase isn't only a communication strategy, it's a way to protect your heart. My dear friend, think back to recent times that you reacted too fast. Did you say things you didn't truly mean? Did you get pulled into a fight you didn't need to join? Next time someone pressures you to answer, now pause, breathe, then smile and say, I'd prefer to hear more before I respond. This phrase is like raising an invisible wall. The other person used to resistance slows down in surprise. Instead of being dragged into the pit of argument, you step higher, standing firm on the ground of calm. When you do this, you protect yourself from a stress. and you send a powerful message to everyone around you. True strength isn't fast reaction, it's mastered reaction. One of the greatest gifts of our 50s and 60s is this. We've weathered enough storms to know not every battle is worth fighting and not every question needs an instant answer. I prefer to hear more before I respond is simple, but it unlocks peace in many situations. It helps you master the conversation and yourself. So let me ask you, next time someone tries to force a quick reaction, will you try this phrase? If you found value in today's lesson, subscribe to keep walking with me. In the next part, we'll explore another phrase, one that breaks the illusion of arrogance without insult or attack. Share in the comments in which situation will you use this phrase first. I believe your story will be a gift to many who are seeking peace in their lives. My dear friend, I want you to recall a family conversation or a meeting at work where someone insisted that their opinion was the only truth. They spoke with such a certainty as if the whole world had to see it their way. And you sat there sensing something was off, but not wanting to turn it into a heated argument. In that moment, there's a Stoic phrase that can save you avoiding conflict while gently bringing the conversation back to calm. It's interesting how everyone sees the world differently. This is not counterattack, it's a mirror that reflects the arrogance back to itself while reminding everyone else opinions are just opinions, not absolute truth. The Stoics taught us that what disturbs us is not events themselves, but how we interpret them. Epictetus said, it's not things themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of things. When you say it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently, you remind people that a viewpoint is only a lens, not reality itself. This gently shatters the illusion of arrogance, the illusion of only I am right. One of my patients, Linda, age 68, told me her son always dominated family gatherings with his political opinions. Anyone who disagreed was met with his anger. In the past, Linda argued back and dinners became exhausting, but then she learned to simply smile and say, it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently. For a moment, her son froze. The table laughed. The tension melted away. Linda said, for the first time in years, I left the table without feeling drained. Imagine another scene. You're in a company meeting. A colleague, overconfident, speaks as if their opinion is unquestionable, dismissing others. The room waits for you to respond. If you attack, the conflict explodes. If you stay silent, you may seem weak. But if you smile and say, it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently, you draw a subtle boundary. You neither reject nor accept them. You simply remind everyone that perspectives are not absolute. And that gentle reminder carries more strength than any argument. From a medical perspective, when you remind yourself that everyone sees the world differently, then you reduce the inner need to control. That release relaxes the body. Chronic tension, especially after age 50, raises the risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and memory decline. But those who practice this Stoic mindset often show steadier heart rates and fewer blood pressure spikes. Do you see? A simple phrase not only changes the conversation, it changes how your body responds to a stress. It is medicine for the soul and sometimes medicine for the heart. My friend, have you ever asked yourself, why do we insist that others see the world as we do? Could it be because we are uncertain about ourselves? When you accept that each person has their own view, you open the door to tolerance. You turn differences into something interesting instead of a battlefield. I remember an older man in his 60s who came to me saying he couldn't stand how his wife always saw things differently. They argued constantly from dinner plans to finances. I told him, instead of seeing it as a threat, see it as interesting. Try saying it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently. Months later, he returned and said, that phrase saved my marriage. Do you see, my friend? This phrase not only diffuses arrogance, it opens the space for peace and mutual respect. It reminds us that no one owns the truth. And when you live with this mindset, you gain respect and life feels much lighter. So let me ask you, next time you face someone who insists they are right, will you try this phrase? If you found value in today's lesson, subscribe so we can continue this journey together. In the next part, I will share with you the final phrase, a simple yet powerful one that can end any argument, strip away arrogance, and reveal the truth behind it. Share in the comments. Have you ever practiced the mindset that everyone has their own view? And how did it change your feelings? I'd love to hear your story. My dear friend, we've walked through 4 powerful phrases to face arrogance. Today I want to share the final one, the simplest phrase, yet the one with the power to end any argument. If that makes you happy, then that's fine. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But let me tell you why this is one of the most powerful Stoic weapons I've ever used in my life. Arrogant people always want to prove they're better, that they've won. But the truth is, behind that hardened shell, they're searching for one thing: recognition. They want to be seen, acknowledged, praised for being right. When you say, if that makes you happy, then that's fine, you gently pull back the curtain and reveal the truth. All that boasting is just an attempt to fill an inner void. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We are not disturbed by what others do, but by the importance we give it." When you no longer assign value to arrogance, it immediately loses its power. I remember a patient of mine, Robert, 67, a former engineer. At work, he often faced a colleague who always needed to prove he was superior. Every time Robert shared an idea, the man would cut in, criticize, and say, "I've done this for decades, you have no idea." In the past, Robert snapped back, and the meeting turned into a verbal battle. But one day he changed. When the colleague acted arrogant again, Robert smiled and said, "If that makes you happy, then that's fine." The room went silent. The colleague had nothing left to say. His stage disappeared. Robert later told me I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed people to see I wouldn't be pulled into that game. The result was interesting. After a few times, that colleague's arrogance faded, simply because no one was fueling his pride anymore. You know, when you choose to let go instead of fight, your body is freed as well. For those over 50, keeping inner peace matters more than winning an argument. Science shows that people who constantly argue have higher cortisol, the stress hormone, which raises the risk of high blood pressure, insomnia, and memory decline. Those who let go and choose calm often have stronger immunity and clearer minds. So the phrase, "if that makes you happy, then that's fine," isn't just graceful behavior, it's preventive medicine for your heart and your mind. Think back to the last time you argued with someone. In the end, what did you gain? Relief or just exhaustion? The Stoics teach that true victory isn't defeating others, it's keeping the soul undisturbed. And sometimes that victory fits in one simple line: if that makes you happy, then that's fine. I've used this within my own family. Once a cousin kept boasting about his business success, subtly comparing it to me. Everyone looked at me waiting for a comeback. I simply smiled and said, "If that makes you happy, then that's fine." The room instantly felt lighter. And the surprising thing, people later came up to me and said, "You handled that so wisely." I didn't need an argument to earn respect. Calmness created it on its own. You see, these 5 Stoic phrases aren't tricks, they're ways of living. They teach us how to stay calm in the face of arrogance and keep our minds free. Would you have a right to think that way? You show maturity. That's an interesting point. You turn attack into reflection. 4. With "I'd prefer to hear more before I respond," you control timing and pace. With "it's interesting how everyone sees the world differently," you shatter the illusion of absolutism. And with "if that makes you happy, then that's fine," you close the game and walk away in peace. My dear friend, remember, whoever controls themselves has already won long before the argument begins. So tell me, of these 5 phrases, which will you apply first? If you found value in these lessons, subscribe and keep walking with me. Here every day, we cultivate calm wisdom and self-respect, the qualities that help us live fully, especially in the second half of life. Share in the comments. Have you ever let go of an argument with calm, and how did it feel? I believe your story will inspire many who are seeking peace of mind.